Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the silence of the penthouse, final and absolute. Julian pressed his back against the mahogany door, his chest heaving, his silk shirt clinging to his skin with cold sweat. Across the room, illuminated by the city lights of Seoul bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows, sat the man Julian thought he had saved. But the figure lounging in the leather armchair wasn't the shivering, pathetic boy Julian had picked up in the rain 6 months ago. That boy was gone. In his place was a predator, swirling a glass of amber liquid, watching Julian with eyes that were no longer doe-like and grateful, but sharp, possessive, and terrifyingly amused. "You're not leaving, Julian," the man said, his voice a low, velvety purr that skittered down Julian's spine. "You haven't paid your debt. And I'm afraid the interest rates are astronomical." 6 months earlier, Julian Vane felt like a god. Or, at the very least, a king among peasants. As the sole heir to Vane Global, one of the largest logistics conglomerates in Asia, he moved through the university campus with an air of untouchable arrogance. He was 22, devastatingly handsome with his sharp jawline and icy blue eyes, and bored out of his mind. He treated the university as a playground, a temporary pause before he took his rightful place at the head of the family empire. He had money, status, and a trail of broken hearts behind him. But Julian's fatal flaw wasn't his pride, it was his savior complex. He liked broken things. He liked the feeling of holding someone's life in his hands, fixing them, and having them look up to him with absolute adoration. It fed his ego in a way his father's money never could. That was why he stopped his Aston Martin on that torrential Tuesday night. Huddled under the awning of a closed convenience store was a student Julian had seen around campus. He was soaked to the bone, hugging a pitifully thin backpack, shivering violently. It was Kalen. Julian didn't know his last name, only that he was on a scholarship, worked 3 jobs, and wore oversized hoodies that made him look younger than he was. Julian rolled down the window. "Get in." Kalen looked up, water dripping from his dark, messy bangs. His eyes were wide, dark, and startlingly innocent. I can't. I'm wet. I'll ruin the leather." "I didn't ask about the leather," Julian commanded, unlocking the door. "Get in." Kalen hesitated, then scrambled into the passenger seat like a frightened animal. He smelled of rain and cheap soap. He told Julian, through chattering teeth, that he had been evicted from his shoebox apartment an hour ago. He had nowhere to go. Julian smirked, the thrill of charity warming his chest. "You do now?" He brought Kalen back to his luxury off-campus apartment, a sprawling place with marble floors and a view of the skyline. He gave Kalen dry clothes, which hung loosely on his slender frame, and ordered expensive takeout. "You can stay in the guest room," Julian said, leaning back on his sofa, enjoying the way Kalen looked at him, like Julian was a deity who had descended from the heavens. "As long as you need. Just keep the place tidy." Kalen's eyes filled with tears. He dropped to his knees, not in a sexual way, but in sheer, desperate gratitude, clutching the hem of Julian's shirt. "Thank you. I'll do anything. I'll clean, I'll cook, I'll stay out of your way. You saved my life, Julian." Julian patted Kalen's head, stroking the damp hair. It felt good. "Don't worry about it, kid. Just be a good roommate." He thought he had adopted a stray puppy. He had no idea he had just invited a viper into his bed. The first few months were idyllic, in a twisted sort of way. Kalen was the perfect roommate. No, he was the perfect servant. When Julian woke up, coffee was waiting on the nightstand, brewed exactly to his liking, black, 2 sugars. His clothes were laundered and pressed. The apartment was spotless. Kalen cooked meals that rivaled the 5-star restaurants Julian frequented, claiming he learned from YouTube videos because he couldn't afford eating out. "You're spoiling me, Kay." Julian laughed one evening, digging into a risotto that tasted like heaven. Kalen smiled from across the island counter. His smile was shy sweet. "It's the least I can do. You gave me a home." But there was a shift happening, subtle as the changing seasons. Julian found himself spending less time at the clubs and more time at home. Kalen was always there, waiting. And Kalen was clingy. It started small. If Julian went out with friends, Kalen would text. Not nagging, just check-ins. Asterisk, I made soup for when you get back. Asterisk, asterisk, it's raining. Do you have an umbrella? Asterisk, asterisk, I couldn't sleep. The apartment is too big without you. Asterisk. Julian found it endearing. He liked being missed. He liked being the center of someone's universe. Then, it escalated. Julian brought a date home one night, a finance major named Elias. They were making out on the couch when Kalen walked in. He didn't say a word. He just stood in the hallway, holding a glass of water, staring. His expression was blank, dead. It killed the mood instantly. Elias left, unnerved. When Julian confronted him, Kalen broke down, sobbing that he thought he was in the way, that he was terrified Julian would kick him out now that he had someone better. Julian spent the next hour comforting him, assuring him that no one was replacing him. You're my priority, Kay, Julian had whispered, hugging the smaller man. He felt Kalen relax, his arms tightening around Julian's waist with a grip that was surprisingly strong. Promise, Kalen mumbled into his chest. Promise. After that, Julian stopped bringing people home. It was just easier. Besides, Kalen gave him everything he needed. Attention, adoration, care. Julian's friends started to joke that he was married. They didn't know the half of it. Julian began to notice other things, too. Kalen was always watching him. If Julian was reading, he'd look up to find Kalen staring from the kitchen. If he was sleeping, he'd wake up sometimes to find Kalen sitting by the bed, just watching. I had a nightmare, Kalen would say, his voice trembling. I just needed to make sure you were still here. And Julian, blinded by his own arrogance and the need to be the protector, would let him stay. He let Kalen crawl into the king-sized bed and curl up against his back. He told himself it was platonic. He told himself he was just being a good guy. He didn't notice that his other friends had stopped calling. He didn't notice that Kalen answered his phone sometimes, deleting messages before Julian saw them. He didn't notice that he was being isolated, layer by layer, until his world shrank down to the size of the apartment and the boy with the dark, empty eyes. The turning point came 4 months in. It was the night of the Vane Global Charity Gala. This was a massive event, and Julian was expected to be there to represent his father. He brought Kalen, mostly because Kalen had looked so dejected when Julian started getting dressed. I've never seen a gala, Kalen had whispered, fingering the lapel of Julian's tuxedo. I'll get you a suit, Julian decided on a whim. You're coming. At the gala, Kalen was a fish out of water. He clung to Julian's arm, eyes wide, seemingly terrified of the socialites and sharks circling the room. Julian felt a surge of possessive pride. He enjoyed the way Kalen needed him. Stay here, I need to talk to the investors, Julian said, leaving Kalen near the buffet. Julian circulated the room, charming the board members. But the atmosphere was tense. There were rumors, whispers that Vane Global was bleeding money. Someone was buying up their debt. A ghost company. It's hostile, his father, Marcus Vane, hissed in a corner, wiping sweat from his brow. We don't know who it is. They know our weaknesses, Julian. They know about the offshore accounts, the tax loopholes. Someone on the inside is talking. Who? Julian asked, scanning the room. We don't know. But they're dismantling us piece by piece. Julian felt a chill. He looked across the ballroom, searching for Kalen. He found him. But the Kalen he saw didn't match the Kalen he knew. Kalen was standing in a shadowed alcove, speaking to a man Julian recognized, a high-ranking senator. Kalen wasn't shrinking. He wasn't stuttering. He was standing tall, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a champagne flute with a careless elegance. His posture was commanding. He said something, and the senator, a man who ate CEOs for breakfast, looked pale. The senator nodded rapidly, looking like he was the one receiving orders. Julian blinked, and the image shifted. Kalen saw him. Immediately, the shoulders slumped, the eyes widened, and he became the shy, awkward boy again. He rushed over to Julian. Julian, that man was asking me such scary questions, Kalen said, his voice breathless. Julian frowned, his heart hammering a warning rhythm he chose to ignore. What were you talking about? He thought I was a waiter, Kalen lied. The lie was smooth, but Julian had seen the senator's face. Senators don't look terrified of waiters. Let's go home, Julian said abruptly. That night, Julian couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, listening to Kalen's steady breathing beside him. Paranoia, cold and sharp, began to bleed into his mind. Why did Kalen never talk about his family? Why did a broke student know how to fold a pocket square perfectly? Why did the security system logs show that Kalen sometimes went out at 3 a.m. and returned at 5 a.m.? Julian got up. He went to the living room where Kalen's battered backpack sat, the one thing he refused to replace, claiming sentimental value. Julian opened it. Inside, there were no textbooks, no cheap notebooks. There was a laptop, a high-end, military-grade machine that cost more than Julian's car, and a stack of files. Julian opened the first file. It was a dossier. Photos, bank statements, surveillance logs. The subject of the dossier was Julian Vane. There were photos of Julian at clubs, photos of him with his exes, detailed maps of his daily routes, and then financial documents. The hostile takeover his father spoke of. The company buying the debt was listed as Ouroboros Holdings. Julian flipped the page. The CEO of Ouroboros Holdings was redacted, but the signatory was a unique, jagged signature. He froze. He had seen that signature before. On the lease agreement for the apartment, Kalen had signed his name. The handwriting was identical. Kalen wasn't a student. He wasn't broke. Looking for something? Julian spun around. Kalen was standing in the doorway of the bedroom. He wasn't wearing his pajamas. He was wearing silk boxers, his body lean and corded with muscle that Julian had somehow interpreted as skinny before. His posture was relaxed, predatory. The shy boy mask was gone, completely dissolved. "Who are you?" Julian whispered, the file shaking in his hand. Kalen smiled. It wasn't the sweet smile. It was a dark, jagged thing. "I'm the roommate you helped. Remember? You're Ouroboros," Julian said, his voice rising. "You're the one destroying my father's company." "Destroying is such a harsh word," Kalen said, walking slowly toward him. "I prefer acquiring." "Why?" Julian backed away until he hit the cold glass of the window. "Why play the victim? Why the act?" Kalen stopped inches from him. He reached out and touched Julian's cheek. Julian flinched, but Kalen's grip turned iron hard, forcing him to look up. "Because Vane Global has security that rivals the Pentagon," Kalen explained softly. "Physical security, cybersecurity, impenetrable. Except for one thing. The air." Kalen chuckled darkly. "You have a weakness for broken things, Julian. Everyone knows it. You like to play the savior. You like to pick up strays. I just made myself the most pathetic stray in the alley." Julian felt sick. It was all a lie. The rain, the eviction. Orchestrated, Kalen confirmed. "I needed access. I needed your passwords, your retina scans, which I got while you were sleeping, by the way, and I needed to be inside the house to plant the bugs. It was supposed to take a month." Kalen's thumb stroked Julian's lower lip. His eyes darkened. But then, a complication arose. "What complication?" Julian spat. "You," Kalen whispered. "You were supposed to be an arrogant, spoiled brat. And you are. But you were also warm. You took care of me. You defended me. No one has ever done that." Kalen stepped closer, pressing his body against Julian's. "I took your company, Julian. As of this morning, your father is bankrupt. The assets are frozen. You have nothing. Your cards won't work. Your friends won't answer. You are destitute." Julian shoved him. "Get away from me. I'm calling the police." Kalen didn't budge. He laughed, a low, menacing sound. "Go ahead. Call them. Who do you think owns the precinct chief? My family has been running the underground of this city since before yours learned how to ship cargo. You call the police, and I'll have your father in prison for embezzlement by morning. I have the proof." Julian froze. He was trapped. "So here is the deal," Kalen said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I own Vane Global. I own your apartment. I own the clothes on your back. Technically, you are the homeless one now." He leaned in, his lips brushing Julian's ear. "But I'm not cruel. I'm willing to offer you a scholarship. A place to stay. I'd rather die on the street," Julian snarled, though his voice wavered. "Would you?" Kalen pulled back, looking at him with that terrifying, obsessive intensity. "You couldn't survive a day out there, Prince. You need someone to take care of you. You need me." Kalen reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. He locked the apartment door from the inside and slipped the key into his pocket. "You see, Julian," Kalen said, his eyes gleaming. "I came to destroy you. But I decided I'd rather keep you. You liked me when I was clingy, didn't you? You liked it when I was obsessed. I liked the boy who needed me, Julian said, tears of frustration stinging his eyes. I do need you, Kalen said, his expression twisting into something maniacal and tender. I need you to be mine. Only mine. No more dates. No more friends. Just us. I stripped away your money and your status so there would be nothing left to distract you from me. Julian stared at him, horror and a twisted sort of fascination warring in his chest. This was madness. This was a monster. But as he looked at Kalen, the man who had cooked for him, warmed his bed, worshipped him for 6 months, he realized the trap had snapped shut a long time ago. You're insane, Julian whispered. I'm devoted, Kalen corrected. He took Julian's hand and kissed the knuckles, his eyes never leaving Julian's. Now, are you going to be a good roommate? Or do I have to punish you? Julian looked at the locked door. He thought of his bankrupt father, his frozen accounts, the cold reality of the world outside that Kalen now controlled. Then he looked at Kalen, beautiful, dangerous, and utterly obsessed with him. A dark realization settled in Julian's gut. He had wanted to own someone. He had wanted a pet. He had gotten his wish, but the collar was around his own neck. And the terrifying part was, he didn't pull his hand away. What do you want? Julian asked, his voice hollow. Kalen smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had won the world. Everything, Kalen said, starting with dinner. Sit down, Julian. I made your favorite. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Kalen take absolute control, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a lover who ruined your life just to keep you all to themselves? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, Yaoi, man 1. Julian, blonde hair messy, wearing unbuttoned silk shirt, expression of shock and fear, pressed against a glass window, sweat on skin. Man 2. Kalen, dark hair falling over eyes, sharp jawline, predatory smile, wearing black tactical gear and a loose tie. One hand slamming against the glass next to Julian's head, other hand gripping Julian's chin. Background is a luxury penthouse at night with Seoul city lights bokeh, dark atmosphere, dramatic shadows, intense eye contact, tension, cinematic composition, intricate details.